Hey everyone, it's me again in early July. I'm just going to continue a little bit with our day two of our foundations. So hopefully I can get all the technology done here and get this going right. Um, so yesterday, well, it depends on what day it is, I guess. But let me switch over to here. So yesterday we went over. I covered this stuff, just sort of a lot of background stuff before we get to the Declaration of Independence and just kind of historical stuff, more so like terminology and some of the history of England, especially, and the Western world and whatever. And so the Declaration of Independence takes place in 1776. So what are the specific events, though, in America that lead up to that? And so this is going to be more of like a little story, just two slides here. But I want to try to understand this as much as you can. In the French and Indian War took place between England and France, 1754 to 1763. It's also called the Seven Years' War. It was the first World War. Took place on several continents. And so you had the two powers in the world, France and England, fighting against each other. So the results of it, we know that England won, because if England didn't win, we'd be speaking French. So we know England won. England gained a lot of land. England won this massive conflict with help from the colonists who were English. And we defeated the French and the Indians, and Native Americans were fighting often on the side of the French. So the main result of it was England it cost a lot of money. So it was just huge, huge debt. And so they needed to raise money to pay this debt. So they're going to start to raise taxes on American colonists. But this is sometimes taken a little bit out of, I guess, proportion or whatever, because we talk about taxes and no taxation without representation. But try to put it in perspective. In 17 whatever 65, all right, just to pick a time, the American colonists were the freest people in the history of the world. They had more rights. They had just won a huge war. They, for the most part, were not harassed by government officials. They had all kinds of rights in the Americas. More people had land percentage-wise than in England by far. At the very height of taxation after the French and Indian War, the Americans, the English were taxed way up here and the Americans were taxed here. So even after all these taxes people complain about and you read about in history books, the English who were living in England had it worse than the English who were living in America, the Americans. So, okay. But we want to complain as Americans. And we complain and we say, don't tax us unless you're going to give us representation. And we don't really have representation. Well, picture this too. We're talking pre-airplanes and motorized boats and things, so no telephones, no internet. So England, in their mind, gave their colonies representation. It was called Virtual representation. And they had a parliament, but it was just almost impossible for them to envision getting people elected in the colonies and traveling back and forth. I mean, think about it. In the 1700s, if you won an election, first you campaigned on a horse and went a few miles a day or whatever to campaign around Boston. Then you get on a boat and it takes you 6 weeks to get over England, and you hope you don't get attacked by pirates or a wreck at sea, and you hope you end up going where you're hoping to go. All right. I remember in the 1600s when the Mayflower came over and came to Plymouth, Massachusetts, it was trying to get to Virginia. It was just a little off course. So you're hoping that you can ride your horse around, win a vote, win popularity, win a vote somehow, and go over to England, and then when they have something controversial come up, if you want to find out what your people want in America, what would you do? You either yourself or somebody else would get on a boat, ride for 6 weeks, hope that you don't die at sea or get scurvy or something. You'd go to the colonies, ride your horse around, find some stuff out, go back. And then if you're going to give the American colonists representation, you're going to have to give India representation. How long did it take? More than 2 months, right? 3 months to get from India to England. So this idea of representation just wasn't really logical to a lot of people, of having real direct representation. So anyway, the Americans complain though. The Sons of Liberty is this group that two of their famous leaders, John Hancock and Sam Adams, very famous names in American history. They went and they caused problems. They wanted freedom, they wanted rights. A big reason was because the series of taxes ended up hurting some of their business. Both of these guys were, they had other businesses, but they were also known for illegally smuggling tea into America. And tea, the Tea Act comes about, well, first of all, when they were illegally smuggling tea, Americans would buy the illegally smuggled tea because there were these things called in the 1600s called the Navigation Acts, and they basically Navigation Acts said goods coming from somewhere like India, like tea, would have to go to England, then to America. Would have to be put on an American or English ship, have an American or English crew, had to have an English captain, had to have a little tax put on as it went through England. So then they were smuggling tea. They just bypassed England. They went straight to America. So the cheapest tea you could buy before the Tea Act was this illegal tea. Well, after the Tea Act, that made it so they're going to enforce the Navigation Acts. They were going to put a tax on all this other tea. But the British East India Tea Company, which had some of the members of Parliament owned stock in it, it could bring tea directly to America without paying that middleman. So after the Tea Act was passed, after the French and Indian War, the cheapest tea you could buy would be British East India Tea Company tea. So people didn't buy the illegal tea from these Americans. And so they were losing money. And there were other things like that too. So they caused lots of problems. We hear tar and feather tax collectors, which is a whole other issue. They burned down homes of tax collectors. They burned effigies or likenesses of the King of England. You can see him here on the top right, tearing down one of the statues in New York of the King of England. They beat people up. They did they caused violence everywhere. And then the Boston Tea Party. I'm a little bit out of order here because Boston Massacre happened before the Boston Tea Party, but Boston Tea Party, they dress up in Native Americans, they throw all this tea, destroy private property, they destroy all this British East India tea, they throw it in Boston Harbor, and Thomas Paine around this time, writing Common Sense, reasons why the Americans should revolt against England. So they're basically causing lots of violence. These people, these patriots, are causing lots of violence. Again, I don't want to get into it now and make comparisons to what's happening sometimes, maybe now in American cities, but they're causing violence, looking for a certain reaction, because then they know the reaction to that reaction. And so what happens then is the English, because there's violence around Boston, they know, as we said yesterday, the number one job of the government is to protect the people. So England sends thousands of troops to Boston, and again, this massacre took place before the Boston Tea Party, but they send thousands of troops to Boston, and they need them to be housed they need somewhere from the state, so they're housed in American homes. Now, these soldiers who were protecting Boston and Americans, they were almost like National Guardsmen are today, where they're professional soldiers, but they're not just being a soldier all day long, all year long. They were coming to America, living in homes of Americans. They would get a regular job, and then they would train on here and there and be ready to be if necessary, if needed. So Americans who maybe didn't care about the cries of no taxation without representation, all that, now Americans are forced to house these soldiers. And just think of inconveniences. You got to think of it from a personal perspective. They're eating your food. They are dirty. They leave a mess. They leave the toilet seat up in today's world. They stink. They maybe eat your leftover potato, whatever sweet potato pie that you had and you wanted it, but they ate it. And so they may come in drunk at night. Who knows? So these soldiers living in your house, you're kind of mad anyways. Okay, but you're not. Well, when the Boston Massacre happens on that day, there were supposedly drunk, unemployed rope makers in Boston Harbor, and they're at a bar early in the morning, and they come out and they start causing problems. And literally, there's one guy standing there, a British soldier, with his gun, and he's getting people are throwing stuff at him, and he's nervous. He's protecting this building, and some of his buddies come over, and they're standing there to protect him. And the crowd grows, and they start throwing things at him, and they're throwing rocks and different things and yelling curse words at these soldiers who have guns. And And then they take, now it's March in Boston, and so it's cold, it's slushy, and so they suppose they were taking other things that they found, not just rocks on the ground, but this is March 1770s Boston, and horse manure is all over the ground. So they're taking horse manure, wrapping it in snow, making snow, ice, slush, horse manure balls, and they're chucking them at the soldiers, and they're hitting them. Your soldiers there with a gun, and don't get hit with a snow poop ball. And the soldiers say, "Stay, stop." The soldiers yell, "Stop throwing poop balls at me. Stop throwing rocks at me." Oh, get hit again. Well, hey, I got a gun. They keep hitting them with these snow ice balls. Well, at some point, aren't you an idiot if you keep throwing rocks and these ice balls at the soldiers who have guns? And so whether they got ordered or whatever happened, several Americans were killed, right? Which don't throw rocks at soldiers who are given the order from the government to protect something. Anyway, but so the soldiers get killed, and so you see the painting up here. There's a couple different versions you can find online, but this is the gist of it. And this picture up here is them firing on an innocent crowd. Paul Revere did the painting. See, there's a little dog there looking on the bottom. And some of the paintings you can find are slight alterations. You can see them a little more clearly. But then this gets out there in public, and these people all over Boston who maybe didn't care much about all these higher causes of no taxation or representation. Now they're sitting there going, wait a minute, I don't care about all these things that people are talking about, freedoms and rights. I think I'm doing fine. But now you're making me house these soldiers who it's like an occupying army. And now they're coming here and they're gunning down my innocent neighbors, my unarmed neighbors. And so now I might want to fight. And this is a real short version of it, but that transition of these American colonists who should have been some of the happiest people in the history of the world, everything was really good for them, even at the height of British taxation. Not many people want to shoot British, but there's a series of events that sort of snowballs into now a lot of them want to kill British. It was never more than 50% that supported the American Revolution. It was like 40%, and then there was a chunk in the middle who didn't care, and then there was 20 or 25% loyalists. But it gets to the point where all of a sudden this is now the occupying force. And you got to think about it. The people who caused the violence, they wanted a revolution. So they caused lots of violence, hoping Britain would respond with force, knowing that would lead to more of a reaction from more Americans who would then maybe want to fight for independence. And so it all builds up to the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. If we are in class, we'll go over it and look at it. It's worth you skimming through it at least, if not reading the whole thing. It obviously it's one of the required documents in this course. It's important that you know it. Number one thing it does is declare independence. But there are the two Enlightenment ideas in there. One is the natural rights. This is the idea right at the beginning of this, where they talk about, in the first couple of paragraphs, they talk about the Enlightenment ideas. He said he uses John Locke's Enlightenment ideas, and the natural rights are all men are born with life, liberty, and property. But Jefferson changes it to the pursuit of happiness. It's a much more sort of noble thing, and not everybody had property. So life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And then the social contract, which is this unwritten contract that we are all part of. And it's this idea that we are part of this contract where people agree to follow laws. We agree to be governed. We agree to give up absolute freedom. But the government agrees to protect us and look out for us. And so the thinking is, just like any contract, if one side violates the contract is void. And so I agree to not speed and to, not burn someone's house down and to not steal from somebody. But I'm in the understanding, though, that Kerry and North Carolina and the U.S. will protect me when needed. So what Jefferson says is the English government stops protecting the people, and he lists all the reasons why in the Declaration. So they no longer have to follow the laws. They no longer are part of this contract. So that justifies them breaking away. So the social contract is this Enlightenment idea that if the people don't follow laws, then the government can, punish them. But if the government doesn't do what they're supposed to do and doesn't protect them, then the people can break away. They can get away from it. So that's the rationale. But really, there was a whole long series of events that take place. I was going to pull up a timeline, but it might be a good idea just do a search, timeline of events leading to the American Revolution, since I'm short on time here. And if you do that, you'll see there's a whole bunch of taxes and other things. But just kind of takes place over, from 1763 to 1776, a whole series of events that lead us to breaking away, culminating with the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution. So my time is up, and that is it for today. So thank you all very much.